Okay, good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order. First order of business is disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none, the minutes from, I better do a roll call just because we don't have everybody there. Diana, can you do a roll call, please?
I can, Your Worship. I can confirm that Councillor Lewis, the IT Manager Cecil Coxon, and myself, Deputy Clerk Diana Wilson, are in attendance in the council chambers. For those participating by video conference, please answer present when your name is called. Mayor Manel?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar?
Present.
Councillor Widner?
Present.
Councillor Moore?
Present.
Councillor Cerna? Councillor Galinsky? Chief Administrative Officer, Clerk Michelle Casavecchia Summers.
Present.
Director of Physical Services, Matt Sweetland.
Present.
Director of Development and Community Services, Jean DeMeo.
Present.
Director of Finance, Arun Mohili.
Present.
That's everyone.
Thank you, Diana. The minutes from June 18th, whether there's any errors or omissions. If not, can I have a mover and seconder for the minutes, please?
I'll move.
Moved by Cerna, seconder.
Move. Second.
Second by Moore, all in favor.
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Manel.
Yes.
Carried.
Thank you. We'll move on to delegations and petitions. Christine, you are doing us a presentation on the complex.
I am. Good evening, everyone. I will try and keep this brief. You have in your package, I believe, the draft financial statements for the complex. They are, it is a clean audit opinion, which means that I did not find anything materially incorrect. Our materiality for the complex is $7,500, although we do, fortunately, before COVID hit, we had to finish most of our testing at the complex. And so we were able to get the revenues and expenditures and payroll all tested through the process all through the year of 2019. So did not find anything materially incorrect and found the internal controls to be in place. So that is a clean auditor's opinion. I'll continue through to the statement of financial position, which is your balance sheet. I don't have a whole lot to say here. As you're aware, the transactions all flow through the town of Aylmer. However, we do have a bank balance for the trust, which is where all the surcharges are deposited and then withdrawn for particular capital projects. So the net financial assets, which is, as I always mention, the line really I look at, which is really what your cash flow position, net cash flow position would be, has increased about $30,000 from the prior year. Then we have the non-financial assets, which are the assets that have to be in place to provide the services that you do. And as you can see, the majority of the surplus is in the TCAs. So that would be your building and land and machinery and equipment within the complex. Coming down to accumulated surplus at the end of the year of 7.7 million. And the decrease is really the amortization for the year. The next statement is your statement of operations, accumulated surplus. 3 columns with the budget for 2019, the actual, and then the actual for 2018. Revenues were over budget by about 30,000. Part of that was Canada Summer Helps Grant, which we got for about 20,000, and then our arena ice rentals were up as well. Under expenditures, I'll remind council that we do not budget for the amortization. So when we look at the total budgeted expenditures versus the actual, you'll see that we are over budget, but that's because of 254,000 of amortization. That's the third line down under expenditures. Otherwise, your overall contributions were up about 20,000 because of expenditures higher than last year. come down to an excess expenditure over revenue, and that's really just because of the amortization. Down to the accumulated surplus at the end of the year of the 7.7 million. I won't spend much time on the next two statements, but I would draw your attention to the note 3, which is a breakdown of the accumulated surplus, which shows that you have a capital replacement reserve fund of 105,000, the flats development reserve fund of just over 1,200, for total reserves of 106,000, and then the rest is the tangible capital assets, as I mentioned. There is a new note this year to the financial statements on the subsequent event because of the COVID situation. Obviously, the facilities had to be closed on the provincial directions, and so just what the impact of that will remain to be seen in 2020. And then at the back, there is a schedule breaking down the tangible capital assets by type of asset. And as you can expect, the building is obviously 90% of the assets. So, any questions at all from council?
Okay, thank you, Christine. Certainly 2019 seems to be very palatable. I'm not so sure about 2020. I think we're
Exactly.
going to be a different scenario entirely. So questions to Christine on the audit? No questions? I need a mover and seconder. The 2019 audited financial statement for the East Elgin Community Complex as presented by Skidmore and Company Chartered Accountants and presented by Auditor Christine Skidmore be approved as submitted. Mover and seconder, please. Did I hear a mover?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Scott moved it. I'll second it.
Second by Widner, all in favor?
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky, Councillor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Christine. Good night. Now, Rob, you're on deck.
Thank you very much. You know, this really is an auditor's biggest concern where normally I'm in a room and you guys have to listen to what I say, but now you can put me on mute and go get a drink and I never know it. So anyways, thank you very
We
much.
do that
for
all the time, Rob.
So we'll go through the financial statements for the municipality as a whole. You do have copies of draft statements in front of you. We'll start with our independent auditor's report. So this is our report on the financial statements. And just as a reminder, these are consolidated. So your proportionate share of water boards, as well as the community complex, which you just saw, are included in these financial statements. Our report is what we would consider to be a clean audit report. There's no qualification, so that's what you're looking for. And it's our opinion that the municipal's consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the municipality at December 31st, 2019, and the results of its operations and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for public sector entities. And this report will be dated as of today with the assumption that council would approve these statements. Our next page is the consolidated statement of financial position, or what you might consider the balance sheet. So these are the values as at December 31st, 2019 with comparables for 2018. I just wanted to highlight some of the differences year over year. So you can see that cash is up almost 1.5 million. That's mostly as a result of you have deferred revenues, which would be your gas tax development charges, are up about 800,000, as well as reserves are about 1.3 increase. So those would result in increases in the cash balance. That'd be the offset to those accounts. Investments. So as you recall, the municipality records its investments at their market value. So our increase is all as a result of increased in market value, again, as at December 31st, seeing roughly a $250,000 increase there. Taxes receivable, you can see are up about $1 million over the previous year. But that really is a result of one in particular tax property. They were appealing their assessment values and hadn't paid the taxes yet. Is about $925,000 for that one taxpayer. So that was collected subsequent to the year end. When we get to note 4, we'll see that we're actually down on property taxes in excess of 1 year. And then our accounts receivable fairly comparable at 1.5 million. That your normal trade receivables, HST, amounts due from the county, water boards, those type of items. So total financial assets of 11.5 million. On the financial liability side, we did have the 2.5 million in temporary advances until we termed that out into long-term debt that related to the fire hall build. So that's now been fully financed with long-term debt. So no further short-term advances required. And as I mentioned, deferred revenues, so that's items such as gas tax, development charges. The government did give you almost twice the amount of your normal gas tax. So obviously that amount hadn't been budgeted to be spent at the end of the year. So that is sitting in your obligatory reserves. Accounts payable and accrued liabilities, normal trade payables, we are up a bit. It's mostly a result of, there was one capital project related to the pier where that particular supplier hadn't yet been paid at the end of the year. And as I mentioned, the long-term liabilities up to 2.188 million of new debt taken on in the year. So our total net financial assets, so seeing that as an increase from 2.3 to 4.5 is definitely very positive. That's what we want to see, is those financial assets increasing. Under the non-financial assets, so that's your tangible capital assets, we had $2.4 million of additions in the year and $2.5 million in amortization. So that's kind of what we're looking for from a government standpoint. The setting these up in the first place, they wanted council to kind of realize, in our best guess, how much of those assets were being used up each year, in hopes that the council would at least try to replace that in a given year with new acquisitions. And we're pretty close there year over year, within 100,000. So our total net assets being 50,424,000. We go to our next page. So that's the statement of operations. So first, I'll note that in this particular case, we do adjust, which most municipalities do for financial statement presentation, adjust the budget numbers that are prepared for your purposes to a PSAB format. So that eliminates any transfers to or from reserves, as well as it records amortization within those budgeted numbers. So at the bottom, when you're seeing that deficit of 142,000, that wasn't a council budgeting deficit, that's a PSAB based deficit. And when we look at note 13, we'll see we started out with a balanced budget before we did the PSAB adjustments. When we look at comparables, so we compare budget to actual as well as actuals for 2018. Property taxes, our supplementaries were slightly ahead of our write-offs, so we were a little bit over what our budget was. Taxation from governments, other user charges, very comparable to budget. Our local improvement levies, that's tile drain collections, so we don't budget for those. That's third-party ins and outs, so that's the 91,000. On the government transfers, we do include capital grants in here as well as part of the PSAB process. So if you're wondering why it's quite a bit higher than the previous year, there were some capital grants included this year. Other municipalities, again, very comparable. Similarly with penalties and interest, other donations. And then the large gain was a gain on sale of a land property. So that's the price that was received in excess of what was originally paid for it, giving us total revenues, again, on a PSAB basis of 14.1 million. Government expenses, general government, fire and protection, very comparable to budget. Other protective services, building inspection, animal control, wages were a little below budget, and emergency services, ice management, well below budget. On the transportation side, below budget, result of fuels, repairs and maintenance a little lower, and some of our wages are included in the capital side of things if for self-built assets. So we're seeing a few of those being capitalized instead of expensed. Waterworks and sewer, we were under budget there. Water purchases were a little under budget. And again, remembering that primary and secondary water boards are included in there, which also had some surpluses on the year. Garbage collection, health services, very comparable. Recreation and culture, we were under budget. There wasn't one particular line. Everything seemed to be just a little bit under. Nothing, any particular line jumping out. So still under budget though, and very comparable on the planning and agricultural side. So and there was, as I mentioned, the amortizations included in all those expenses at 2.4 million. So we had an annual PSAB surplus of 1.2 million. And that brings our accumulated surplus up to 50,100,000. Keeping in mind 46 million of that surplus is invested in tangible capital assets. We're going to speed things up a little bit here. The next statement, just reconciling our net financial assets, taking us from a basically accrual to a cash basis and seeing an overall increase of 2.3 million. The next page is our reconciliation of remeasurements. So what that is that's the basically the difference between your investments at their cost versus their unrealized gains. So there's roughly $319,000 of unrealized gains in the portfolio at December 31st. The next statement of cash flows, again, takes us from an annual, an accrual basis back to cash. Where did we spend our money? Where did we bring money in? Again, bringing us to an overall cash increase of the 2.1 million. We now jump into the notes. I'm going to move through those fairly quickly. If we go to our note 2, page 13 of our financial statements, that is that breakdown of the cost versus market on the investments. And so you can see where we're seeing those increases. We move to note 4 on page 15. So that's that taxes receivable, as I'd mentioned, the one property in current, seeing our actual arrears coming down from 783 down to 544,000. The next page, page 16, note 5. So that's the continuity of the tangible capital assets. That's showing us original costs, additions in the year, and ending cost balances, as well as opening amortization, carry forwards amount, amortization on the year, and the ending balances. The next page is the same information, but for the previous year. If we go to page 18, your note 6 and 7. So this is where we've gotten rid of the temporary advances and we've taken on that new long-term debt that was financed at 2.188 over 20 years. I think next page, note 8, is one that definitely focus on a little bit. That breaks down that accumulated surplus so that readers can see that the bulk of that 50 million obviously isn't in an annual surplus. That's invested in tangible capital assets. The actual annual surplus on the year of 114,000. We can see our consolidated water boards 420,000. The complex reserves 53. Benefiting landowners, so that's tile drains where you've taken on expenses on behalf of those ratepayers. A couple of larger drains taken on in the year and will be built out next year. And that unfunded capital projects, so that you can see in the previous year, 2.8 million, that was the fire hall, and had been financed out in the current year, which is what we want to see. We don't want to see large balances stay around in unfunded capital projects. And reserves up nicely from 5.9 to 7.3. The breakdown of that just below. And just so that you know, under other municipal services, we're seeing quite an increase there. That related to the Smart Communities grant. There's 558,000 that was put into that reserve to be spent for the next couple of years. Our next page, page 20, note 9, deferred revenues, as I mentioned, the federal gas tax receiving almost twice the normal amount in the year. So that was put aside until it could be put forward to projects. We go to page 22, note 13. So that's where I mentioned that we did have the adjustments for the approved budget to the PSAB. As you can see, that approved budget did balance to zero before we made the adjustments. And I think the last note I'd like to focus on, page 24, note 15. So this is just the subsequent event note with regard to COVID and the potential costs that it may have. We're totally unclear at this point what all those costs are, but we're just making everyone aware that there could be some unforeseen costs that arrive in the 2020 budget related to the COVID. I covered things pretty fast. Hopefully I didn't too many people didn't mute me as we went through. Is there any questions from council at all?
Thank you, Rod, for that report. As I said to Christine, that 2019 is easy. 2020 may be a different scenario entirely. So, questions to Rob on the auditor's report? Hearing none. Mover and second, the 2019 audited financial statements for the Corporation of the Township of Malahide, as prepared by Graham Scott Inns and presented by Auditor Rob Foster, be approved as submitted, and the mayor be authorized to sign the audited letter from Graham Scott Inns dated July 9th, 2020, on behalf of the Malahide Township Council. Moved and second. Moved by Serna, seconder.
Here.
Second by Widner. All in favor?
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky, Councillor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes.
carried.
Thank you.
If I get 1
Thanks,
minute, I'll
Rob.
also talk briefly about the audit findings letter. So that is our comment to council with regard to controls, with regard to working with management. So that letter is again what we would consider a clean findings letter. There were no unadjusted errors. All systems were functioning as we expected. Management was excellent in working with us in these conditions where obviously we couldn't attend the building in person. Anything that we asked for, we responded very quickly and were given copies of what we needed. So we thank management very much for working so diligently with us during this very difficult time for all of us. So at the end of the day, that is the letter that you're looking for is no issues whatsoever with regard to the audit.
Good. Thank you, Rob. All right, we're going to move on to Matt. Physical Services Drainage Update Report.
Actually, we have Bob here with us tonight that's going to deliver this report.
Okay, go ahead, Bob.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. I have the my biannual drainage update report for you. As you can see, there's quite a few drains on the go here. There's some notables. We've had 3 drains completed this spring. The Carolyn Davis drain, which was for a severance. The Fenty drain, which was actually awarded almost 2 years ago. That one finally got done this spring. The 2 petitioners, the 2 landowners, are very happy with the way that turned out. We also have what's the other one? The conservation line drains for the township project on conservation line. Those are also completed this spring by Van Gorp Drainage. We've had several delays, obviously due to the COVID situation. I have 4 drains at the moment pending consideration by council. So I'm hoping to get those on the next council meeting, August 13th. We can get those through. They're not complicated drains by any means. They're pretty straightforward. I'm working on several cleanouts at the moment on the maintenance side of things. And I'm doing my usual, my usual ongoing maintenance that I do on a daily basis kind of thing. Other than that, there's not a lot of exciting things on this report. And I will stop there, and you can ask me any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Bob. Questions? The Hansville drain, data petition 2010 and 2020. We're still waiting for the results of an RFQ. What's going on?
Your worship, that drain I've sent out for an RFQ, which closes tomorrow. I didn't realize the dates would be sort of after council. I should have had it closed before, but anyhow, I'm hoping to get some good prices tomorrow. We've sent it out to 4 or 5 local contractors that have done work for the township in the past, and we're hoping to get some favorable pricing back for that one, as well as the Van Witchen drain, the clean out, the unauthorized clean out that was done on that particular drain. That RFQ also closes tomorrow as well. So we're hoping again to get some some pretty competitive bids on that one. So I will try. Maybe I'll send out an email tomorrow and keep everybody updated on the situation there with those 2.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Questions for Bob and his report?
Mr. Mayor, just one quick question.
Go ahead, Dominique.
So Bob, you mentioned delays related to COVID. Can you specify what is the nature of the delay that would affect I think you mentioned 4 that are in process?
Yeah, we have four that we've sort of gotten through the various on-site meetings and the various preliminary meetings. We've had a few meetings, a few teleconference calls we've had to do. I think we did one video one as well. Just mostly delays due to not being able to meet with the landowners. I've had several meetings with the landowners, that I've had to use the proper COVID protocol. It's just basically the face-to-face aspect of the job is starting to slow things down just a tad.
I'm not totally convinced, but okay.
I mean, the drains that are the upcoming drains that are coming to council next meeting. Those are pretty straightforward drains. They're for smaller drains for severances and whatnot. I know the engineers have had some staffing issues as well. They've had to lay off staff or have staff working from different locations as well. So there's that aspect of it too. It's just the drainage process is slow at best. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Bob? Seeing none. Mover and seconder report number PS 20-35 entitled Drainage Update Report we received. Moved by Moore, seconder.
I'll second. Jaguar.
Second by Jaguar. All in favor?
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky, Councillor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you. Matt, you're doing the Amos settlement area? Safety zone?
That's right. Yes, so good evening, Your Worship and Council. As Council will recall, the staff were directed to implement a community safety zone throughout the Amish settlement area and additionally reduce the speed through this area to 60 kilometers an hour. So within the settlement area, there's a short section of Glencullen line between the north and south sections of Springfield Road that's under the Elgin County's jurisdiction. So in order to maintain consistency and avoid having a short 100-meter section of roadway with increased speed back up to 80 kilometers an hour and without a community safety zone designation, the county would need to grant its approval for the speed reduction and that designation on the short section. So at the request of the county engineer, the purpose of this report is for council to authorize the municipal staff to petition the county to allow this section of roadway to be designated as a community safety zone and reduce the speed limit there in order just to maintain consistency with other similar and prior requests. So the total cost of implementing the community safety zone and speed reduction is $11,200, which includes the installation of all the signage required by the Highway Traffic Act. And it also does, that number also does include this short section of Glencullen line. So if there's any further questions, I'd be happy to advise.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Questions for Matt?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Mark.
Yeah, Matt, you were saying you got to petition the county for that short little stretch of road?
Yes, that's just because we can't implement that because it's not our road.
So will that hold up our procedure for another month?
It shouldn't. I don't expect it will have to go to their council, but we can get signs up in other locations.
Okay, that seems like bureaucracy at its slowest, but anyway, it's only like 200 feet, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty short section, but we can't do it. So
Okay, and we're leaving out, I've spoken to you about this, I guess, we're leaving out college between Ossian and Springfield. I have some thoughts on it, but I don't know what the rest of council thinks. I mean, I think that in the beginning we thought that would be part of it, but we haven't taken into consideration the OPC runners and a lot of people that use it around there. But I'd like to see what the rest of the council thinks about that. There is a big business on there, but I'm just curious what everybody else thinks. Thank you.
Just as an update, Mark, I see on Tuesday's agenda on county council that the recommendation is to reduce that speed to 60 on Glencullen on the county side.
Great,
So that should be rectified on Tuesday.
good, thank you.
Questions for Matt?
I've got a couple.
Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Matt, how many signs are we talking about there in the Amish area?
I believe there are 64 signs in total, that being the speed reduction signs as well as the community safety zone signs. In all locations where it's possible to double up signage on one post, we're taking that route. But the challenge with this area is that it's an assumed 80-kilometer zone. So at each interchange, we need to be able to show that it's actually a 60. So we can't, and being a community safety zone where speed fines are doubled, the traveling traffic must be aware of that case.
That just seems like a lot of signs for that size area. You know, I can't get over that. 60 signs.
Yeah, that's correct. And that is the requirement under the Highway Traffic Act, that otherwise a motorist wouldn't know that they were in a community safety zone and wouldn't know that the speed limit was 60 kilometers.
Okay, it just seems like a lot. Okay, that's it for now. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to add that I've been endeavoring to go down Glencullen line to find out what people actually thought of this community safety zone and reduced speed limit. And only one person didn't agree. Everybody else thinks it's a good idea and they can hardly wait for it to happen. So I think we're doing the right thing here. As far as Mark was concerned about that stretch of road on College Line, Yeah, there's only 2 places there, but it's still an extension of the Amish community. And I don't know how many buggies go down there. I usually stay in Poland, but to just add that little chunk to me wouldn't matter. So that's my thought on it, Councillor Widner.
Thank you. Anybody else have any?
How many more signs are we looking at, Matt, to include that portion on College Line?
I would have to look at where the last sign is regarding the closest interchange, but I would believe that it would be another 4 signs. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't have to look at the map though.
I'd be in favor of including 4 more signs to include the whole Amish community. Any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Mayor, I would be in favor too. I don't think it's the busiest or the most used stretch of the settlement area, but it is. And there are some concerns around speeding on that stretch as well. So for 4 more signs, I think doing all at once, as I always say, I'm always in favor of that.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, I have another point I would like to make, Mr. Mayor, if I could. It's
Yep.
like, this isn't just a community safety zone for the Amish specifically. It's a community safety zone. And we're gonna have police cadets in there all the time there, they're jogging around. One of these days, we might want one of them to come and enforce a speed limit. He's gonna remember that, oh yeah, well, you're the son of a gun off the road. So, no, we should look after them as well. I think it's a community, not just Amish. Okay? Thank you.
All right, any other comments?
Yeah, I have one.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, the one concern I have with that stretch of road, I guess, is like evergreen trees are planted all along the south border, and it's really dark, and sometimes they just can't see people there, especially if it's a buggy. So they have lights on them. But I did speak to some members of the Amish Safety Committee, and they are quite happy with what is going on, and they'd like to thank us for doing that. So they realize it's not just for them; it's for the whole good of the community. And the more you read, it's a problem everywhere. I see Central Elgin has a big problem with speeding, and I mean, people go by this road 80 miles an hour sometimes at night. So it's going to have to be a learning or a teaching method to tell these people to slow down. But I don't know what the answer is because it's all over.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Any other questions?
One more point, sir.
Go ahead, Rick.
In my travels, talking to all these people there, regardless of what we do there, we have to have enforcement. Whether the speed limit's 40 kilometers an hour, 60, 100. If you don't get enforcement there, then this is all for naught. So somehow we've got to convince the OPP that's out there that they're going to have to do some enforcement for us. And I don't understand, at Christmas time, they have ride programs all over the place and tons of police. And sometimes they have community policing where you get cops from St. Thomas and Elmer and OPP, and they're sitting outside of town. Why can't we have a blitz like that once in a while on Glencoe Line or College Line? If we don't get the enforcement, then this is all for naught.
Well, I agree with you, Rick. And once we get the signs up, I think we can notify the OPP that this is a community safety zone and ask them to have a blitz in there. And I think you'll see the speed reduced.
I'm hoping so.
I have one question, if I could.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Matt, the flashing lights, that is still part of this proposal. Then I know I spoke to you about it, but I don't see it in writing too much. So.
That's correct. That is the flashing lights on the large settlement area signage is included in that $11,200 price.
Okay, and also a question, with the community safety zone, are the points double if you're caught?
It's a financial fine of double.
Okay, the points aren't doubled either.
I don't believe so.
That'd be a good incentive. Thank you.
Any other questions for Matt? So including College Line on Matt's report, so you need a mover and seconder.
Move. I'll move.
Moved by Widner, seconder.
Second.
Seconded by Lewis, all in favor.
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you. Gene, you're doing the next one?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I have two reports for Council's consideration this evening. The first one being DCS 2020, which is an application for consent. The applicant being William Reimer is proposing to create through consent one new residential property of approximately 1,894 square meters, which is located in the town of Elmer. And this is on Elk Street. The applicant will retain 217 acres of agricultural land, which is located within the township of Malahide. This consent is proposed to be created at Concession 6, North Part Lot 14 and 15, and it's municipally known as 49639 Talbot Line. If there are a number of conditions placed upon the consent, but staff have reviewed it and do not have any issues with that, and would recommend that council would support it if the conditions can be met. So if there's any questions.
Thank you, Gene. Questions for Gene on this severance? Seeing none, mover and seconder report number DCS-2020 entitled Severance Application E11-20 be received. This report before the Land Division Committee for its review and consideration, and there are 5 conditions.
I'll move it.
Moved by
I'll
Lewis,
second.
second by Moore. All in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
We're
Counselor
getting really
Galinsky,
echoey here.
Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you. Next one, Gene?
Yeah, my final report is report DCS 2021, also a severance application. The applicant, Kenneth Stover, Mary Stover, and Anthony Stover are proposing to create through consent one new farm surplus residence of 2,262 square meters. The applicant will retain 147.6 acres of agricultural parcel, and this will be located at 5237 Colton Line. So this is a fairly common farm surplus dwelling application, and we've recommended our customary conditions with respect to this type of a severance. So staff have reviewed it and would recommend to council that this is something that can be supported.
Thank you, Gene. Questions for Gene on this severance? Seeing none, mover and seconder report number DCS 2020-21 entitled Severance Application E15-20 be received. This report before the Land Division Committee for review and consideration, and there are 3 conditions.
Jaguar, I'll move.
Moved by Jaguar, seconder.
I'll second it.
Second by Cerna. All in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you. Okay, Director of Financial Services, Arun, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Your Worship.
All right, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Today, I present before you a financial report for the first half of 2020. It has been, as you heard from the auditor, quite a different 2020, and the Mayor has alluded to it as well, that things are going to be a little different this year. Since this is the first time that I have provided such a detailed report to this particular council, I would like to go through it in a little bit of detail. Looking at the main report itself, I have right now noted two particular expense lines. I have identified the expenses for COVID-19 related activities because this was something that was not in our budget. It was an unplanned activity, so it's an unbudgeted expense. And the other item specifically identified is the loss of revenue from interest and penalties on taxes and utilities, because this was a budgeted revenue which we took a firm decision to waive for a roughly half the year up until September 15th. So it's an estimate, the amount of revenue loss at this time. These two items I have tentatively identified as the key items that are the result of the COVID emergency declared by the province and by Malahide as well. The first two, going to the attachment, the first two, or before I jump into that detail, I'd just like to make one other point here is that there are obviously a lot of other revenues and expenses that are also affected by not only COVID, but other factors in the environment. At this time, I did not bring forward any projection of where we will land at, because initial discussions with the rest of senior staff and with my peers in the region and other municipalities, it looks like there is still a lot of swings that we will experience, and I really do not want to peg a number at this point in time for those other revenue or expense lines. Moving into the details, the attachments, you'll see the first 3 pages, pages 87, 88, and 89. This is a report summary, which is typically what council has received in the past as a part of the financial report. It shows the summary of the revenues from the different departments. So the first page, page 87, towards the bottom, it shows that our total revenue budget for the year is about 25.15 million. And so far we have 12.1. However, this is not a real or a true number, because there are some items in here. One, these are not necessarily all brand new revenues received as such. There are in these lines transfers from reserves that are taken into revenue to allow operations to proceed with any activities that are planned and budgeted for that year. So when we say 25 million in revenues, that's not brand new money coming into the township. Secondly, there are timing issues where we have received some in advance, and so it's more than 50%, whereas there are others which are still to come. For example, the gas tax money we have received in full. They fast-paced that and we received it in full. The OMPF, on the other hand, is at the 50% right now. So there's a lot of timing and seasonality of revenues that affects that number there. The next section is the total expenditures, where again, of course, we have budgeted for 25.15 million because we cannot budget for a deficit or surplus as a municipality. We have to have a zero budget. And our actual expenses at this point are about 12.2 million, which is close enough to the 50% mark. But again, this is not necessarily 50% of all expenses as such. So right now, we are just getting busy in a lot of projects, or we are, beginning some projects. So there will be a lot of revenues and expenses that will come in over the summer, and which will lead to a much better picture when I bring my financial report for the next quarter. So that is the report that has been generated right out of our financial software. The next 4 pages, from page 90 to 93, are basically the same report, the revenues and expenses, except that they have now been grouped together by the department so that you can see the revenues and expenses by the department instead of one long page full of all revenues. So you can see the net budget and the net impact or the net actuals for each department as such. After that, we go into the report, which is a test of your eyesight, essentially. Unfortunately, I have tried my best to keep it clear enough and yet not lose out on the detail or overpower you with detail. Things may change with my next report as I receive feedback from you tonight. Since it's the first time, I would like to try and go through some of the lines here. However, Mr. Mayor, if you think I am putting everybody to sleep, please stop me. Don't mute me, just stop me.
Well, if you have some highlights, why don't you hit the highlights and then we'll leave it up for questions.
Sounds good. Okay. All right. So the first section here is about 4 pages or so. It's related to taxation. The first grouping is our township taxes. And you'll see the very first line, our 2020 year-to-date actuals are about 8.48 million. Now, this is the full scope of tax levy that we collect. So it includes the county and education board shares. And typically what we do with our interim tax billings is we bill out at 50% of prior year. So that's why roughly our full levy sits at around 16 million. So we have billed out about 8.5 million. And so if you'll see in the note, I've mentioned that right now this is all posted in one account. However, when we finalize our taxes, now that we have our final tax rate levy approved by council, we will do the final tax billings in a month or two, so that when we have our true levy for this year, then we will make sure the amounts are posted on the right lines and posted to show the county share of the levy and the school boards all across. So that is why you will see that there may not be revenues shown in the county revenues, for example, county tax revenues or all the English boards. The school boards, but that's because right now this is based on interim taxes, not our final taxes. If we go on to other revenue, so that's about 5 pages ahead. You will see our other revenues are primarily the OMPF, where we have budgeted about 797,800 and we have received 50% as per the usual schedule. We have got some revenue from license issues, lottery licenses, but I'm not sure whether we will make much more because it again depends on permissions for public gatherings and any social events. So that is, but then it's a very small portion of our total revenue anyways. The taxes, tax penalties and interest line you will see is at roughly 40,000, whereas our budget is 190,000. And this is essentially because we have waived interest since about March or April. So we had a charged interest for the first 3 months of the year. And since then there has not been any charge. So we will definitely see some revenue loss on that line. Going on from there, then we come to governance, which is essentially council, and then administration is the next department right after. So governance and administration are the oversight departments, I'd like to say. I would like to clarify that the wages line there reflects a portion of staff time as well. So because certain staff members are providing much more support to council, so that portion of wages expense is charged to the governance GL. It doesn't necessarily mean that is only council pay in there, and that's how the budget has been set as well.
No.
Now, in the administration GL, we have basically expenses that we then transfer out. These expenses are more applicable to the entire organization. So they are charged in just one spot. And then we have the admin overhead where we transfer out a portion to each of the operating departments based on either the usage or number of staff, depending on what the particular expense item would be. The next department after administration is the fire department. You will see the first line there, revenue from MTO. We are doing pretty fine as per budget. It looks like we are at the 50-60% mark. However, a couple of lines down there, you'll see the fees and recoveries, which would essentially be revenue from any courses conducted for the OPC, as well as the bottle filling. Those have come to a standstill because of COVID, and as a result, you don't see any revenue at this point, at least. Perhaps in the next 6 months, things may change. They may go to a different model of providing training. The fluidity of the situation is such that in the beginning, everything was a complete standstill, whereas now things are changing or people are realizing this is a long-term situation and trying to find alternate ways of continuing business. So this could still change, but as of now, at least, we are not seeing any revenues there. We then come to building. As you will see here that the first line of revenue there is a transfer from reserve. So essentially what that represents, and this is what I was trying to explain earlier as well, is that revenues doesn't necessarily mean new money. It's because we have in our building budget the potential of needing an additional building inspector. And so to fund that expense, we have the budget to take that money from reserves to fund that additional expense. If at the end of the year, it turns out that additional inspection services were not required, this money would then be returned to reserves at the end of the year based on, or if there was a portion of it needed, then only that much would be retained to fund the operational expense and the rest would go back to reserves, which is what happened in the prior year. You'll see we have a budgeted transfer from reserve of 25,000 that was taken. But then when you go down to the expense section where you see the transfer to reserve, you'll see it's at 27,000 because the 25 was returned to reserves as it was not needed in 2019. And the other item I would really like to highlight with a smile on my face is that our building permits and septic permits are doing very well. So Jean has been promising me that it's going to be a good year. So perhaps we will still do well, which is again why I don't want to give a firm forecast. Yes, Jean, thank you. That's why I don't want to forecast either doom and gloom or a great year or a, usual year at this point. Next, we come to animal control. We have done very well with our dog tag revenues. We have actually collected a slightly higher than budgeted amount. We had a new process in place where people came in to pick up their dog tags along with their bag tags or when they were paying their taxes, the November installment, which resulted in a much more efficient distribution of the dog tags, as well as there were several people who said to us, oh, I didn't know I needed a dog tag, and we were able to, issue dog tags to some new dog owners as well. So that has been a good revenue receipt there. The Conservation Authority levies are the last 3 lines on that page, which are basically based on their budget and what is our share for the region. Moving on to policing, the grant that you see there is the Prisoner Security and Court Transportation Grant, which we receive as a part of the whole billing from OPP. And then their billing right now is only at about 23% because we haven't received, we aren't, halfway being billed through. It's again a timing issue, like so many other expenses and revenues. Our POA is is doing all right. Hopefully things may change in the next few months, but it's similar to last year, I would think, at this point. Emergency management is where you will see a significant increase in expenses because all our COVID related costs have been posted there in order to track them separately, in the hope that at some point the province or the feds may, bring out some dollars from their treasure chest for municipalities. We have been hearing from for quite some time now. Recently, even yesterday in Premier Ford's announcement, there was some discussion about assistance to municipalities, and we'll know when we know about what we get. But in the meantime, it's critical that we track all our costs. And that's why you'll see even staff time has been tracked here. This staff time is not necessarily overtime, but it is time that was dedicated to any COVID related regional meetings or with meetings with the emergency control group, or when Brent has to interact with members of the community regarding questions or deal with any issues arising from that, or when we have our staff go out to any particular location to assist with any questions or to manage any issues. So anything that any activity or any task that was done as a result of COVID-19 is what has been isolated and charged to this particular GL here. And this is for everybody in the township, all our staff, whether Michelle or everybody else. In the
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask a question while we're on this?
Go ahead, Donnie.
Before I forget. So I just want to clarify what you just said, Arun, in terms of, so earlier in the narrative of the report, it talks about unbudgeted expenses.
Right.
To the tune of 60,000. And I think some of that is wages.
Yes.
And what you described just now is not, so you said that you're tracking wages that are dedicated to COVID, but they're not unbudgeted. It's just staff time. It's just that their work is doing unplanned work, but not unbudgeted. Am I getting this right?
Yes and no. Yes and no.
Okay.
And so yes, it is unplanned work. The
Okay.
wages to a certain extent would be in our budget, unless there was overtime, which we had not planned for, or we would have budgeted for some overtime. So yes, there would be a budget, but that budget was for that wages and that staff time to be dedicated to certain other tasks and certain other activities, which are not being done or are being done at a reduced level, or they may not be done because of prioritization or because COVID has now forced us to not do those activities. So it's not like, so my grounds to assign this to emergency management is that yes, we have a budget to pay for my time between 8:30 and 4:30. But from that, if I'm spending 3 hours discussing with my peers about what is going on with COVID and how do we manage that, or I am spending that time with my staff, alleviating any fears about how do we work in this situation, that time is being taken away from what I would have done. I would have finished my FIR by now. We would have brought the audited statements a month ago to you. So that time has now been taken away from my regular tasks and dedicated to COVID, and therefore it's an opportunity cost that we need to identify and highlight.
So if I may follow up, Mr. Mayor, so what I'm hearing is it's causing a delay, but ultimately we're not spending more money on wages. We're redirecting the wages, and staff are being asked to reprioritize, which, pandemic or not, I think you would agree that that happens all the time. There are things that we plan to do in a year and then we don't do because things happen that we had not planned for. So I just want to be clear, like if we're reporting I guess the difference between unbudgeted, unplanned, and overages. And I don't think we have any wages overages so far related to COVID. Would be correct?
Your worship, if I may jump in for a moment, we do
Go ahead,
actually
Michelle.
some of our building attendants who wouldn't have been assigned to clean some of our facilities as frequently. So we've had to enhance the level of cleaning and sanitation than we did before. So some of our staff are doing that now. So included in that 60,000 is some of that. So while there has been essentially a transfer, I guess, of functionality accounted for of our budgeted stuff, there is additional staff wages that wouldn't have been undertaken had we not have had to do additional sanitation, for example. That's just one that comes to mind, but there's a combination of both.
So I'm wondering if for later, or maybe with a follow-up email, if we can clarify, like if there's actual overtime that we're paying, like additional time, not redirected time. It would be good to know the difference, or like what is the actual amount that we are spending, like actually spending more because of COVID.
I will try my best, but I would rather wait for the next report, and I would be able to give you a fuller picture in my next financial report.
Okay, fair enough. I just don't want it to, so, because it could be misinterpreted. Unbudgeted, we could argue every year there are things that are unbudgeted and we never report that way necessarily. So to me, unbudgeted means like, uh-oh, we're going over in one box and now we're going to have to find the money somewhere else, which what I'm hearing is not quite yet what is happening.
Yes, but then when we make the choices ourselves, it's our discretion, correct? Whereas this is something that has come from the outside, and therefore I think it is slightly different in that aspect.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for Arun?
Yeah, I have one.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. Through to Arun. I guess, is it safe to say that it is $43,000 over and above, or is that blended into other areas? I think the way I read it in the report, we're 43,000 over on wages, but is that not true?
This 43,000 is wages that are dedicated to COVID. I am not saying that they are over or under. I am saying that they were unplanned, unbudgeted, and therefore they are identified as a cost of doing business. At the end of the year, we will know whether we are able to absorb those costs or what truly was the cost because we had to give up other projects or we lost other revenues. All that will tie together to identify the total cost of the emergency. And staff time is only one portion of it. We are also spending a lot more on cleaning. We have been purchasing PPE and additional cleaning supplies. So there are other costs involved as well, which ultimately will be the total amount or the total impact of the emergency.
Right. I guess the way I read it, we did buy more masks and there are certain cleaning supplies, that's fine, but I thought the wages were at 43,000. So when I saw that, I was a little concerned. So now I think you clarified it. So it's not necessarily 43,000 more. It's going to be allocated to departments as the cost of what happened.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Arun, are you finished your report?
If council wishes me to continue, I can do, or if there are specific questions to the rest of the departments or the previous ones that I spoke to, I'm happy to take those.
No, let's continue and we'll finish up with you.
Okay. So you'd like me to continue, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. So we move on to waste management, where we are seeing we are seeing a slight reduction in our revenues from recyclables, which was something we had been advised of last year because of the general market trend throughout the world that there is less demand for this in the secondary market, I understand. So we are seeing, we did reduce our budgeted revenue for this year, but at this time it looks like we will come up short on that as well. The library is, it's a small department. We get revenues as per our agreement, and that follows its own schedule. So right now we see only 25% received there. We next come to the group of departments relating to the community services, our ball diamonds, the concession booth, the two community centers, MCP and South Dorchester. And you will see that most of these are showing very low or zero revenues. Ball diamonds, we don't have any activities. We are unable to set up activities there, so we don't have any revenue. Events at MCP and South Dorchester Hall have had to be canceled, so those revenues are sitting at what we did in the early part of the year. Perhaps there may be some relaxation in the rules at the latter part, and we may see some revenues still materialize later on. The concession booth, I'm not sure. I don't expect it will open. Senior staff will have to discuss how best to approach that. We do have an agreement for an annual payment, but that's something that might have to come up for discussion at a later stage. So moving on from the community centers, we come to the complex, which is based on the estimates and the budget developed by the board and the town of Aylmer. So that again is subject to what they expect to occur at the complex in terms of activities, and I believe there is a report tonight about ice time, and so I'm sure there'll be some discussion at that point. The parks, again, we see similarly, we are doing all right overall. Sorry, just give me a moment here. We have, yes, so that's where we have our budget for the money that we give to Aylmer for the swimming pool, which we already know we will not be asked of this year. So there will be some cost reductions on that line. So there's all these factors which will eventually lead us to a different bottom line than what we see right now. The cemetery is, the revenue is entirely based on any interments that occur during the year. It's not a predictable item at all. And then we come to the planning department. Here you will see that there is a significant low revenues line that you see for the planning fees. And this is largely because those activities have been brought to a tentative halt right now. That has been the provincial direction. However, I understand, and I'm sure Gene can give me his thumbs up again, is that there are people looking to carry out certain activities, but they are waiting for the direction or some of the rules and regulations to be relaxed. So that would perhaps by fall or by the end of the year, that revenue line will be a little bit better than what we are seeing right now. BIS services, we had our key source of revenue here was from the support we provide to other municipalities. So you can see we have about 40% of our revenue there, and then we have had a staff turnover. So things will again pick up, and we will have a course of action proceeding very shortly. Economic development is basically your ELG incentives, and those are based on how the county approaches those, and it's based on that whole initiative. Then we get into the physical service division departments. We have our drainage, roads operations, and fleet. These are again based on the need of the time. For example, for the ditching and the grass cutting and so on. So those are proceeding regularly. Those operations have continued. Staff have been given direction to use appropriate safety measures. And then I would quickly like to go to the capital projects that we have. So if we go to the last 2 pages, essentially, last 3 pages. So we have capital projects. I have tried to put down notes to indicate what those projects are and where we are with those projects. We have, for example, website redesign is going on. That is expected to wrap up very soon. We should have a report to council very soon. Some items, some of the projects that we have put on hold are essentially in the parks area, I believe. We had one large project in the roads department, our Cressy Line Bridge and Culvert, and that has started. We started the EA late last year and it got completed early this year, and we are proceeding with that work for sure. And then we have purchased picnic tables, the accessible picnic tables for Port Bruce and MCP. So that particular one is complete. We have some park redevelopment happening at the Copenhagen Park that is expected to begin shortly. So there will be that, you will see progress in that particular project. But we had about 10,000 budgeted for a cement pad for a scoreboard. The scoreboard installed by the Brewers Association, but now with all the activity on board. Councillor Glinsky looks like that's wonderful. Hello, Councillor.
Hello.
So I was just speaking to the financial report, the financial report 20-12, and I was talking to the capital projects that are in progress at this time. Some of them are a carryover from last year. So on some of the lines, you may not necessarily see a budget, but there will be some expenses, particularly our roads projects, which are at the tail end or they're almost done at this point. So there will be some expenses which council had approved to carry over the budget to this year previously. So that is about it. Mr. Mayor, I'm open to questions.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. And just a compliment to Aaron. I was in a conversation with Jeff Urich and Karen Vecchio, and they wanted to know the financial position not only of the township but of the county. And so Aaron forwarded on our financial position that was caused by COVID and the position that it puts us in. And both Jeff and Karen are working on our behalf, both federally and provincially, to get money forward to the township to compensate for our extra expenses in COVID. So thank you for doing that, Aaron. So questions for Aaron on her report?
Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to request any comments or suggestions on the presentation itself, the format of the report, and any details more or less that council would prefer.
I can't imagine we need more details there. Any other questions or comments for Arun?
Mr. Mayor, I will say that I do appreciate the detail. I think it's always better to have more, and then anybody can just pick and choose what is most important to them. And I think it's probably sufficient for staff to then just draw our attention to what is most critical and that what really needs to be flagged for everybody. Otherwise, I think because we received the report in advance, like I said, everybody's free to digest individually to the level of depth that they want and to communicate with you for additional follow-up. So thank you very much for providing that information.
Any other questions for Arun on her report? Seeing none, mover and seconder that report number FIN-20-12 entitled Financial Report to June 2020 be received.
I'll move it.
Moved by Sir, seconder by
Jagger, I'll second.
seconded by Jagger. All in favor?
Counselor Whitner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jagger,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes.
carried.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'd just like to make one statement before Arun leaves, that you did an excellent report and it's a lot better than what the feds came out with a couple days ago.
Well, they don't have to deal with the, I don't have to deal with the billions and trillions. I don't know how many zeros they even have on their books.
That was scary. And we're hoping that they're gonna start digging out in their pockets to help us out. I think we're gonna be in for a big surprise.
Well, at least I'm hoping that they will stop, it will at least temporarily stop some of the reductions that we have been seeing, for example, in our OMPF funding. At least it will, keep us at where we are instead of just trying to even to run to be in the same place.
Yeah, I agree. Good
Okay,
job.
Aaron, you are doing the annual report as well?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So this is our annual report. It is, I guess, a continuation of what the auditors presented earlier tonight. I have tried to design it using my predecessor's report and try to add some more detail. I'm open to questions. I don't think I need to walk you through it because the auditor spoke to most of it. Most of the similar items today.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Questions to Aaron on the 2019 annual report? Seeing none, mover and second.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, if I may,
go ahead.
maybe just a comment, and I think that is something I've spoken to before, just in terms of, I want to make sure that we use the concept of performance appropriately. So in my mind, performance is really when you assess a result based relative to something else, so relative to a goal that you had or relative to a previous result and relative to standard. So I think what we have here, so I appreciate the report. I think it is, again, a good level of detail. But rather than calling some of the sections key performance indicators, which I think would be misleading, I think what we've been provided with is facts and figures. And I always like to joke about the fact that if I tell you that on my last round of golf, I scored 82, and you're going to determine whether you should be impressed with that or not, I would say, well, you need to know more. You need to know whether it was whether I played 9-hole or 18, whether it was a par 72, and whether my last round was actually 40. So 82 is just a fact or a figure. It means nothing without the additional. It's not a performance. So I want to make sure, and in the future, so I think having those facts and figures is really important. And in the future, I would be even more interested in our actual performance. So perhaps something to work on for next year.
Any other questions for Arun?
One, please.
Go ahead, Mark.
Mayor, page 131, Arun, I guess we're going to be getting rid of our F on our asset ratings for the peer.
Yes, our peer rating will improve drastically next year because of all the work we have done. So from a F, we will expect, I'm expecting we will be at an A. Yeah.
Been there for a long time.
Yeah.
That's great. And it looks great down there too. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, mover and second report number 2019 annual report as submitted by the Director of Finance be received.
I'll move it.
Moved by Whitner, second by?
All second it.
Galinsky, all in favor?
Counselor Whitner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jagger,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes.
carried.
Thank you. We have 12 items of correspondence. There's two that I would like to highlight. Number 4 from the county. Support for the Western Wardens Caucus in advocating for the region's fair share of the CTRC $750 million broadband fund. Ontario has 38% of the population, and certainly the Western Wardens are advocating that 38% of that 750 million should be going to Ontario. So I think we need to support the Western Wardens in number 4.
I've got no problem with that.
I certainly would support that.
Yeah, no problem.
And the other one is in number 9, County of Elgin correspondence to Elgin Middlesex London MPP, Elgin Middlesex MP, and Federal Minister of Finance, Provincial Minister of Finance advocating for stable funding transfer payments to Canadian municipalities in 2021. We can't forward or can't balance our budgets if we don't know where we are going with OMPF or any of the transfer payments that we're getting. And I know we're getting a financial tsunami coming in 2021. As Rick stated, there was $343 billion deficit. But we cannot run a deficit. And so we need to know ahead of time what our financial situation is going to be. So I would certainly recommend that we support number 9 as well.
I got no.
Anything else that we need to bring up or support?
Mayor Manel, I have a question.
Go ahead, Jess.
Number 10, Aylmer, they talk about shared services. Is the liaison committee picking up on this and working with them? Do we have any information on that?
Michelle, you've been talking to Jenny?
Your worship, through you, the shared services discussions that are referenced in that letter is working with our consultants that we've hired to do the service delivery review, and a large component of that is looking at potential shared services with our immediate neighbors, Aylmer being one of them, as well as BAM and Central Elgin. So this particular response is in response to a request to work with our consultants to look at and identify other opportunities where we could look at shared service initially. And as you recall, as I said, that's one of the deliverables that's to come out of this review. And then at that time, this particular council and Aylmer Council as well would be in a position to be able to determine whether or not there were some of those opportunities that they would like to investigate further. At that point in time, I believe that we would be in a position to be able to strike the liaison committee and have those discussions. At this stage, until we have some recommendations and some actual ideas or suggestions on what to pursue, we don't have that information. So this is a request to them to participate in our service delivery review and look at shared services in that context.
Thank you.
Okay, Jess, any other questions on the correspondence? Okay, so I am seeing we're supporting number 4 and 9 and receiving and file the ballots. So mover and seconder for that, please.
Move.
I'll move.
Moved by Moore, seconder by Cerna, all in favor.
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Giguère,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you. Other business.
I just have a to make,
Go ahead,
if I
Rick.
can. Yeah, I was reading in the paper there the other day about this COVID situation that we've run into in Aylmer. And I was wondering if St. Thomas Public Health, they say they're working with these people. I'm wondering if we could push them a little harder, because I don't think these people are getting the message. And really, I hate to say it, that when I was reading the Aylmer paper in Houston said that too, that masking should be almost mandatory in certain situations. But when you get 50 to 70 people going to a funeral, there's got to be something done. And somehow these people just do not understand. They think they're immune to the disease. I got friends of mine that were talking to somebody back in March, and that person was telling them, "Oh, we won't get it. We already got it back in November." And they just don't seem to be getting the message properly. So I think we need to push St. Thomas Public Health to push them a little harder. I don't care if they have to get interpreters or do whatever, but this is unbelievable. We're doing so good, and then all of a sudden one screw up, and that's one of many. There's other examples of people that are flaunting the law, getting away with it, and don't seem to think that they're gonna ever get sick. But I bet you if I lit a cigarette up in town, they'd be all over my ass like a dirty shirt. So I think we need to get them to get their priorities straight and push them a little harder.
Okay, thanks for that report, Rick. Michelle and I are going to be talking to Southwest Public Health tomorrow at 10:15. And I do know that Public Health has contacted everyone that was at that funeral and are isolating those individuals. But we will follow up and just reassure that tomorrow.
Okay, that's good. Got nothing wrong with a mask either.
Anything else under other business?
Yeah, I have something.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm dealing with a farmer that's trying to add a value-added business to their farm, and I've been doing some correspondence with them. And what they tell me that OMAFRA, and actually I spoke to Mr. David Rowe about it, we could just put an amendment in our official plan to make things flow a lot easier. Well, I wonder if we could just check into that to see how easy that would be to do instead of having to go through an owner's task. I did speak to David Rowe myself. He says, yes, other municipalities are doing it. They usually do it when their official plan comes up, but all you have to do is an amendment to your own to make this a lot easier for anybody that wants to do a smaller addition to their farm like that. So can we just look into that, please, and get an answer?
I think staff can look into that and come back with that in another meeting, Mark.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Is that acceptable, Michelle?
Yes, Your Worship. Actually, we, as you know, are going to be looking at a new official plan. The planners are working on the background studies now. We anticipate the first background study to come back to council for consideration this fall. And Gene can speak more to that. He has had a meeting with our planners this week, actually, and had some discussion. So Gene's back online, so I'll maybe let him add. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess through you, Your Worship, to council and through to Councillor Widner. I know we've spoken about similar things in the past with respect to value-added uses on farms for agricultural purposes. And, you know, my understanding of that is actually Elgin, both in its OP and it's the Elgin incentives and all that kind of stuff are one of the more progressive counties with respect to allowing value added and those type of uses to occur on farms. By allowing them to do it, it doesn't mean that you're exempt from the planning process, because the planning process is also the check and the balance of the system, so that you're not doing things that, you know, necessarily are not complementary. Just having a added use to an agricultural property doesn't mean you can do anything. It means it actually has to be an added use to that property. So I would say that we're not the most difficult county to work with respect to that. But obviously, if the individuals have samples of other counties that they feel are a little bit easier to deal with, allow maybe a broader use of value-added uses to that farm, I would, if they have examples, that would be great if you could send that to us. I will definitely forward that on. Michelle will forward that on to our planners, and we can use maybe some of those models if that's where council wants to go as a sample to develop our own OP policies with respect to that. So, but one of the catches at this point is now that we have a county OP and the county is our approval authority, the way the system works is now that the county's there in its place, we under them have to follow their policies. So our OP can't go out and do something that the county OP doesn't allow. So all the planning policies need to flow, and one complements the other one, which allows the other one. It's just the way the system works. So again, any samples that they have, you definitely want to get to us, or if you want to reach out to the individuals and send us those samples so that we can kind of vet it, and that Jay and Dan can then go up the food chain, make sure that everything that, you know, would be proposed or supported by council actually falls within the policy framework that we have in place. You just can't go off on your own anymore. It all needs to flow. So, and again, as I've, you know, we've worked with this council for many years. We're very, very aware that this council is very supportive of on-farm business, any opportunities to be able to, you know, create income and diversify uses on properties to allow those individuals to do the best they can do on their property with hopefully as little interference from government as possible. But, you know, you still have to appreciate there is a framework that they need to work into. So I just kind of throw that out there. So any information you can give us, we'll definitely put up the food chain, but it's not as simple as just because one county does it, that means we can do it. There's more pieces to that puzzle. So.
I was told that the revision to the provincial policy statement. So do you know anything about that?
Well, the provincial policy statement allows those type of uses to occur, but the way it allows it to occur is through the official plan and through the zoning bylaws. So the way the hierarchy of that goes is the province is here, the counties are here, and we are here. And basically they all need to flow up and down through. So the policies need to complement each other and be in compliance with each other. So that one branch can't go off and do something different that the other two don't, you know, correlate with. So again, my understanding of Elgin's is we actually are quite progressive and quite open for value added on farms with respect to most of the province. So it surprises me a little bit that, you know, we're not in a place where we are being open or that we allow these type of uses. But again, this doesn't mean that you don't need a planning amendment. There's still checks and balances within that system. So whatever that the individual wants to do, we do need to still make sure that it is appropriate, that it's safe, that you know, you're not causing an issue with neighboring properties or whatever the case may be. So it's not just a carte blanche where you can just do whatever you want. There's still, you know, things in place to allow those, but I guess what makes us a little bit more progressive is that the framework is in place that if someone does have a valid application, you can actually do it here. There are places that you can't do it at all. There is no value added. Agricultural is agricultural, commercial is commercial, industrial is industrial. So if you want to do, you know, a processing or whatever, well, you need to go into town, buy an industrial lot, and that's where you'll do it. They don't even look at the fact that you can do something on a farm with farm product. So, you know, I guess that's a very long-winded explanation. I apologize, but it's more complicated. There's a lot more moving parts than just, you know, looking at the PPS and kind of reading a paragraph and trying to say that that's what you can do. But I can say, and I can say very confidently, Elgin and Elgin's OP is very, very pro-ag. And there are a lot of provisions within that OP to allow diversity within that agricultural environment. So I would believe that there is a framework in place definitely to make sure that these individuals can get to where they want to go without being that much of a hindrance to that process.
Good enough.
Okay, thanks, Gene. And Gene, just on another note, I believe this is your last council meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Well,
I would say it's my last official council meeting. Michelle has told me that I'm still coming back for certain things, whether I want to or not. But yes, no, it is my last official meeting, Dave. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of council and staff, Gene, I want to compliment you on, was it almost 20 years of work for being with the Township of Malahide. And I know not every resident realized how hard you work, but certainly staff and council does know how hard you work. And we really appreciate all the work you've done over the last 20 years, guiding us in the right direction, whether it be planning or building or anything that comes under your umbrella. So I want to wish you your best going forward. I know you're not going very far, but we're going to miss you and appreciate all the work you've done for us for the many, many years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you very much. And it's been it truly has been a pleasure. So I wish you all the best. It's a fantastic place to work. It's a wonderful community, and take care of it. And I wish you the best. And yeah, I won't be that far. And some of you I'll see probably a lot more, and some not so much, but my phone number is still the same. And so absolutely, I appreciate all the opportunities and all the wonderful times that Malahide and Council has provided me in my life. And it's been a pleasure to work for you for this long. So thank you.
Thank you, Gene. You'll be missed. Anything else under other business? I do have one that it's been a kind of a pet peeve to me. As most of you are aware of, we have Moby mats down in Fort Bruce, down to the beach. And previously in the past, we've always put a T on the very end. So those in, whether it be wheelchairs or walkers or those with compromised abilities could go down to the beach and sit there and watch the ocean. And because of the high water level, this spring, we were not allowed to put the T next to the beach. And so I asked the administrator at that time, can we not move it north into the vegetative area? And Rhonda Card, who was the superintendent of that time, said, no, we can't disturb the vegetative process. So I talked to our Jeff Urich, who is also in charge of parks, and Jeff looked into it for us. Rhonda Card is no longer the superintendent down in Port Burwell. She's been reassigned. Brendan Shepard is the new agent, and Brendan put the T under the Moby mat today. So I am very pleased that now we have accessibility in Port Bruce. And if you get a chance to see Jeff Urich, thanks him for his input.
Good.
No, that's good.
Thank you.
All
Your
right.
worship, Your worship, through you, there is one report under other business from the town of Almer's CAO.
Go ahead.
So there is one report that Jenny Rayner, CAO for the town of Almer, has submitted for this council's consideration. As well, this exact same report is going to be submitted to the town of Almer Council at its meeting this coming Monday. As you're aware, in order to make decisions about the complex, the two councils usually sit as a board. However, as a result of the challenges with the current procedure bylaw for the Board of Management, individual reports are now going to be submitted to each individual council, and as long as the councils agree, everything will move forward, which is the same reason why the financial statements came directly to this council. They'll be going to Almer Council as well on Monday in order to be able to move that forward and have the final approval there. But there is this one report for council's consideration this evening. It's to provide you with an update on the current financial status at the complex. The report is quite straightforward, I believe. As a result of redeploying a number of the complex staff to the Almer Parks and Recreation area earlier on this year, they've been able to minimize some of the financial implications as a result of COVID. However, the report does identify that there will be a significant loss of revenue over the course of this year, or that's being anticipated. However, there are as well some reduction in expenditures. Again, I'm going to echo what Arun had said earlier, is it's a little bit early still to know for sure how much we're going to be able to make up, because there is an anticipation that the province will look at relaxing some more of the restrictions that are currently in place for recreational programs and activities. And as a result, the staff are recommending that ice be installed in the Kinsman Arena in mid-August, just the one ice pad at this stage, until we know a little bit more where things are going to be at for the rest of the season. So the East League Arena will still could be used for pickleball courts or other types of recreational activities until we are able to determine exactly what will be allowed, what types of capacity reductions might be in place for programs or for gatherings over the course of the next few months. But so staff are looking for authorization to be able to install ice in one ice pad in mid-August.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Questions for Michelle on her report?
Let's have one.
Go ahead, Mark.
Under 63640 hydro costs, I'm really surprised there's $62,000 worth of hydro being used if the place isn't even running. I mean, I realize you're going to have some air conditioning on, some fans on, but I need a better explanation. Well, that's a lot of money for hydro.
Yeah, and that's for year to date. So that also includes hydro, like when we were open for January, February, and March as well. So it's not just for this current period. It's essentially the first 6 months, similar to what everyone had projected. So we did have, of course, we had ice in for until mid-March when it was taken out. And yes, there are still activities taking place in there, not gatherings, but as was noted in the report, there's maintenance activities that are going on. There is still staff that works out of there. So there have been significant reductions from where we would normally be, but there are still costs. It's a big building, and there are still some activities that do go on in terms of maintenance and staffing and those types of things. So there's a need for that.
Thanks, Michelle. Any other questions for Michelle on that report? Seeing none, mover and seconder for the report, please.
Move it.
I'm sorry?
I'll move it.
I'll
Who
second.
is it? Second by Galinsky. I don't know who moved it.
Lewis.
Hi, Lewis.
All in
Yeah.
favor?
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes.
carried.
Thank you. Go into bylaws. Mover and seconder bylaw number 20-43, being bylaw to prescribe a speed limit of 60 kilometers per hour on certain roads in the Amos settlement area, be given a first, second, third reading and properly signed and sealed, and that is as amended.
Correct.
I'll move it.
Moved by Serta, seconded by Moore. All in favor?
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes.
carried.
Thank you. And mover and seconder of the bylaw number 20-44, being a bylaw to designate a community safety zone in the Amos settlement, be given a first, second, third reading, properly signed and sealed.
I'll move that one too.
I'll second it.
Moved by Serta, seconded by Whitmer. All in favor?
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Definitely yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes.
carried.
Thank you. Now, mover and second of the council will move in a closed session at 9:20 pursuant to section 239-2 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss a labor relations or employee negotiation and or personnel matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees relating to staffing and development and community services department. Mover and seconder.
Move it.
Moved by Moore, seconder.
I'll second it.
Second by Widner, all in favor.
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis.
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky. Deputy Mayor Jager,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you.
Your Worship,
we're
we
gonna-
just need to take a short break and while we turn off the live streaming before we move it into closed.
Okay, you let me know when you're ready.
Thank you. Your Worship, you can go live now.
Okay. Mover and seconder that effective July 18th, 2020, Building and Bylaw Enforcement Manager Scott Sutherland be appointed on an interim basis as the Chief Building Official, CBO, for the Township of Malahide. Mover and seconder, please.
I'll move it.
Moved by Cerna, seconder. Second by Lewis, all in favor.
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jager,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you. Now, mover and seconder bylaw number 20-46, being a confirmatory bylaw, be given a first, second, third reading, properly signed and sealed. Moved by Lewis, seconder
Second.
by Moore, all in favor.
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
Oh.
Deputy Mayor Jager,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you. Now, mover and seconder of the council adjourn its meeting at 10:46 or 9:46. To meet again on July 23rd at 7:30. Mover and seconder. Galinsky and Widner, all in favor.
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jager,
Yes.
Mayor Manel,
Yes.
carried.
Okay, folks, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for attending. Stay cool, and we will see you in a couple of weeks.
Hey.
Good night, all.
Good night. Thank you.